the scene. He's got the voice that's mean, asking those questions that you never seen. He's got that fire, burning bright and clean. Andrew Keen making waves, break the routine on the Keen on show. He brings the heat, asking the minds, digging deep till they bleed. No sugar-coated truths, no lies to deceive. Andrew Keen, the master of the interview beat. He's got the knowledge, he's got the flair, challenging ideas with a fearless stare. With every question, he's uncovering what's there. Andrew Keen, a truth seeker, he's aware.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Keen On. As we get closer to the November election in the United States, another repeat match between, if that's the right word, between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Lots of pieces about Trump, how awful he is, how irrelevant he is, how inevitably he's going to lose. And most of those pieces, I think, are repetitive and often not really particularly accurate. There was one very interesting piece on Trump, though, from early May in the New York Times, an op-ed by my guest, Steve Fish. He teaches political science, distinguished professor of political science at UC Berkeley. And he had an op-ed entitled, "Trump Knows Dominance Wins. Someone Tell Democrats." It's built off a new book he has, "Comeback, Routing Trumpism, Reclaiming the Nation and Restoring Democracy's Edge." And I'm here with Steve in his UC Berkeley office with a wonderful view of the Bay Area. Steve, when you look at this title, "Trump Knows Dominance Wins, Someone Tell Democrats," it suggests that you might be somewhat of an admirer of Donald Trump. Any truth to that?
Not an admirer at all. What I am suggesting is that the Democrats are losing to Trump along several dimensions. One is this dominance dimension that you mentioned. Trump is all dominance all the time. He tries to make opinion rather than just taking it. He's never met a pollster he wasn't happy to ignore. He embraces transgressive language. He embraces us versus them politics. He's risk acceptant. The Democrats are almost the opposite of those things these days. They didn't used to be. If you go back to the 20th century, types like FDR, JFK, LBJ, they were what I call high dominance types. But today's Democrats, for the most part, have backed away from dominance politics. That's left Trump as kind of the dominant figure in many ways in American politics. It's all Trump all the time in the news. The Democrats tell you what they think you want to hear. Rather than give as good as they take, they recoil with umbrage every time Trump says something offensive. These are the hallmarks of what I call low dominance politics.
This, again, coming back to my original question, it suggests a degree of admiration. What's wrong with dominance politics? It wins. You talked about FDR, JFK. You have a lovely photo of JFK on your desk. Why doesn't Trump exist in that tradition? Maybe going back to Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, JFK, even Ronald Reagan, of dominance politics.
Dominance politics does win. The problem is that dominance is a neutral tool. It can be used for good or ill. And, the kind of figures that I mentioned earlier, that you just mentioned, FDR, JFK, MLK was a very high dominance politician. They used dominance for liberal ends and for democratic ends. What's more, a high dominance Democrat that's just with a small d, not only uses dominance for democratic ends, but doesn't make it all about himself or herself. For someone like Trump or Putin, it's all me all the time, only I can do it. A high dominance liberal like an MLK or a JFK doesn't seek to form a personality cult around himself, and his whole cause is about something much bigger than himself. So dominance is just a neutral tool. It can be used for good or ill.
It's rather as if you're talking about technology, but the dominance liberals you've talked about, JFK, maybe RFK as well, Martin Luther King, these are men who died more than 50 years ago. Has something changed, Steve, in our age of celebrity politics, of social media, of reality television, or saturated reality television, where everything seems to be reality television? Is it only possible to be a dominant politician on the right?
Not at all. In fact, we do have examples of high dominance liberals in the United States, and they take a variety of forms. Everybody's style is different. There's no like one archetype of a high dominance politician. A high dominance politician is somebody who tells you what they want you to, who tells you what they want you to think, rather than reading polls and telling you what they think you want to hear. Somebody who's forthright, somebody who embraces conflict, somebody who is really willing to give as good as they get. And again, there's a bunch of different dominance types here. There's Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky. He governs in a deep red state, and yet he governs as a liberal. One of the first things he did when he got back to office, when he came to office for the first time, was reopen the Planned Parenthood clinic in Louisville. He chides people who don't get vaccinated. He doesn't always tell Kentuckians what they want to hear. And yet his style, that's a high dominance trait. And yet his style is really very nice guy style. Then you've got Jasmine Crockett, another high dominance liberal, who's all spice and sauce. She's the second-term congresswoman from Dallas. And if you just watch her takedowns of MAGA miscreants on the floor of the House, you'll see what I'm talking about. A very different type of dominance politics. I devote a whole chapter of my book to Jasmine Crockett.
What about the intersection between politics and reality television and celebrity? It seems as if Trump merges the two worlds. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether everything he does is on celebrity TV or whether the whole world has become one episode of the Trump show. What are the technological media components of this new world of dominance? The kind of politics of dominance that Trump has mastered, is it a feature of the television and digital age?
I don't think so. I mean, there have always been politicians who really told you what they wanted you to believe, who tried to make opinion, who embraced us versus them framing, who were conflict acceptant. This isn't necessarily a media thing at all. You know, and the fact is we do live in an age of clickbait information and infotainment, and it's very important to be entertaining, to be interesting. And oftentimes high dominance politicians will use provocative, transgressive parliaments, and that gets more clicks, it gets more attention. But this isn't necessarily an internet age or even an electronic age thing. This has been true for, I think, as long as there's been a politics in the world.
Does dominance politics, or successfully dominant politicians, do they muddle up left and right? I was in Louisiana a few months ago, visited the Huey Long memorials, the statue, went to the State House where he was assassinated. Long was clearly a dominance politician, but he doesn't fit into natural left-right camps.
No, I mean, dominance is not a matter of left or right. You can be left, right, or center and be a politician who tells people not what you think they want to hear, but what you think they want to believe, who embraces conflict, who embraces really taking it to their opponents. That doesn't matter. You can be left, right, or center. So you've got both.
Can you be center, Steve? Really? Is there such a thing as a centrist dominant politician?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, look, if someone is telling you not what you think, not what they think you want to hear, based on some polls, but they're telling you what they want you to believe, and they're hammering their truth home to you constantly. If they embrace conflict, if they do not shrink from conflict, if they do not follow polls, and if they use whatever kind of language they need to get their message across and they stick with it, that can be a high dominance politician. They don't have to be extremists. You've got dominance left, right, and center. Bernie Sanders is a relatively high dominance politician.
He's not a centrist, though.
No, Bernie Sanders isn't a centrist. But someone like Andy Beshear, who I just mentioned in Kentucky, Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, these are not far left or far right politicians, but they still fit this profile of a high dominance politician.
I wonder if you want to have your cake, Steve, and eat it. You want still centrism. You talked about Whitmer, who always struck me as being rather boring, but what do I know? And dominance politicians. Do the two really go together? Don't you have to have strong positions? It's one thing not to say what your audience wants to hear.
You do have
but you've got to be saying something that's slightly shocking, something uncomfortable, something that will make people fearful or excited.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think somebody like Gretchen Whitmer actually does stick by her guns. She does tell people what she believes. And she does work to persuade you of her opinion. She doesn't just tell you what she thinks you want to hear. But again, a dominant politician doesn't have to have a Trump-style aggressive, front. They can be softer, like a Whitmer, like the governor of Michigan or like the governor of Kentucky. There's no one particular style, and you don't have to be, extremely abrasive. You do have to be willing to offend people. Absolutely. You do have to be willing to tell people not what you think they want to hear, but what you want them to believe, right? You can do that in many different styles. And these politicians all represent a different brand of that kind of style.
Steve, can you be a dominant technocrat, the technocratic age, the top universities, the think tanks, the world you're part of? Doesn't it actively discourage and even punish people who are in any way offensive?
It does to some extent, but we're talking here for the most part, and I talk in the book, not about people in bureaucratic positions, but the people who lead us, the politicians we elect. And those are the people whose fates are going to determine the fate of democracy in the United States. Look, if Donald Trump is reelected, and if the Senate swings to the Republicans, and if the Republicans retain control of the House of Representatives, democracy as we know it in this country is going down. What matters right now more than anything is that the Democrats with the Republicans in every successive election for the foreseeable future. The Republican Party is now the enemy of democracy in the United States. Wasn't that way until Donald Trump, but it is now. So what really matters are the political styles of the people we go out and vote for. And what matters above all is that the Democrats change the game in a way that they're able not only to squeak by on the Republicans' abortion bans and kind of hope to survive another day, but they change the game in a way that they reestablish the kind of control over the federal government that they had, say, during that middle third of the 20th century between FDR and LBJ. That's the only route over the long haul to preserving democracy in the United States.
Steve, we haven't brought up the current president of the United States. Maybe he'll survive, maybe he won't, Joe Biden. Is Biden the un-Trump, and then in that sense also the undominant, if there's such a word, politician? Does he represent everything that you are arguing against? Is he the warning?
No. In fact, I think Biden, when he steps out and when he is Biden, he's got the right stuff for the most part. He's not a naturally high dominance politician like a Margaret Thatcher or a JFK or a Jasmine Crockett or Donald Trump. He's a terminally nice guy. He doesn't really experience the Republicans as enemies. He doesn't like us versus them politics. But at the same time, Biden has got the right stuff. He's got a wicked sense of humor. He just needs to show it in public. He can be really exuberant. That's another aspect of a high dominance politician. They use humor. They use it in an eviscerating way when they're called to do so. Biden has everything it takes to be an effective candidate. The problem is it seems like he doesn't really let it hang out. Now we're going to see whether his team will kind of unloose him. Biden has done several things recently that gave me some hope. First of all, he really owned the Republicans in the State of the Union address. He really stepped out there. He wasn't just afraid of offending every organized interest. He wasn't afraid of offending at all. He seemed to really step out and really take it to the Republicans. That was great. Then his staff leaked some of the very salty language he uses to describe Trump in private. And it was not the kind of thing you're used to hearing from old Joe. And I think that also created the impression that he was really, he was a more forceful guy. And then most recently, we heard the way he responded to Trump's challenge to debates. Make my day, pal. I hear you're free on Wednesday nights. That's the kind of thing Biden has to do every day. In the absence of that kind of behavior, Trump always makes news. The news is always about Trump because he's more entertaining, he's more provocative, and he seems to really take it to his opponents. That ultimately, I found in my research, is the main source of his strength, rather than the popular rising bigotry in the United States or economic desperation. I found very little evidence in my research that those are Trump's trump cards. In fact, Trump's trump card is the fact that he always tells you what he thinks. He seems to get stuff done. He doesn't seem to be pushed around by advisors or anybody else.
Steve, this debate about how to deal with Trump is one that the Republican candidates in the primaries in 2016 had to deal with. And I remember people arguing the same about Jeb Bush, that Jeb Bush was a nice guy and that he was obviously better suited to become president than Trump. Trump eviscerated him. People suggested to Bush that he needed to be more like Trump and make my day and be aggressive and all the rest of it, to borrow your language, become the dominant politician. And as he tried, he made an even bigger fool of himself. Can Joe Biden really convince the American people that he has a little bit of Donald Trump in him? It doesn't seem to, in my mind. Isn't he better just to be Uncle Joe, Grandfather Joe, decent guy, inoffensive, and hope to win because of the anti-Trump vote?
No, Biden doesn't need to borrow anything from Trump. He is the anti-Trump, and he's supposed to be the anti-Trump. And you can be a commanding politician as an old grandpa, right? But you do have to be willing to be offensive. You do have to be willing to get in people's faces in his own grandfatherly way. This is what Biden needs to do. He need not ape Trump. There's no way that any liberal is going to ape Trump. Trump is actually his own thing. His brand of dominance is hubristic, it's boorish, it's sexist, it's authoritarian. No liberal need imitate that. For an example of what I mean by high dominance parlance and style, listen to FDR's speech that he gave 6 days before he was reelected in 1936, reelected for the first time. He gave it on October 31st, 1936. Then he went on to win one of the biggest margins in American history. If Biden just took that speech and basically had his speechwriters tweak it, update it, this is an example of the kind of thing that if he gave that speech and he gave it in his own Biden way, I think the notion of a Trump second term would be ridiculous. He should give that speech as his DNC acceptance of the nomination speech coming up in Chicago, but he should give pieces of it. He should give pieces of it with the style that FDR delivered in every day. If he did so, he'd be a high dominance politician in a liberal way. Look, you've got to get down into the mud and fight with these people. There's no doubt about it. But you don't have to be a pig down there in the mud with them. You can be a brave lion who's like enjoying a slice of Trump pork down in the weeds. There's no reason why you actually have to engage in Trump's tactics and Trump's style. But you do need to overmatch Trump's dominance game, or he's going to seem like the stronger figure. What I found in my research, Andrew, is that people respect and seek what they strength in their leaders at least as much or more than they seek leaders who care about them, really care about people like them, or are knowledgeable or experienced. Those traits might matter, but if they're uncombined with this perception that you really are a strong leader, then people are going to doubt your ability to get your policies through and sustain them anyway.
Steve, you mentioned the FDR speech from 36, suggesting that Biden might repackage or recycle that. But of course that was more than 80 years ago, and we're not living in the New Deal America. And 2024 is very different from the America of 2024 is very different from the America of 1936. There are people on the left who want Biden to be offensive, not in tone, but in substance. People want to drive Biden leftward and perhaps ape that New Deal speech and New Deal policies. How do you distinguish between style and substance of the dominant politician? Because some people might be listening to you and thinking, this guy's just another slick political marketer telling Biden to say stuff that people will be impressed with and may end up voting for him. People, particularly on the left in the Democratic Party, want profound change, which is offensive, not just to Republicans, but to some mainstream and conventional Democrats.
It is, but look, Biden is the most progressive president. Biden is the most progressive president we've had since Lyndon Johnson. I mean, Biden's...
It's not saying much, Steve, is it?
Well, I mean, by American standards, it is.
More progressive than Barack Obama?
Yes, he's certainly more progressive than Barack Obama. He's an old-fashioned progressive. He's an old-fashioned LBJ, FDR progressive. What's constrained Biden, to the extent he has been constrained, is Republican intransigence. He has not had large majorities in Congress, but to the extent that he's been able to do his will, what he's done is very progressive if you look at his policies. The problem is most progressives, including a lot of young people, don't know it, and that's a matter of messaging. I have many students. There's a lot of young people who don't know what Biden's done. progressive kids, if they knew the number Biden had done on child poverty with his child tax credit, if they knew about how strong he is on civil rights, then they would be much more enthusiastic about it. The problem is they don't know, because Biden's messaging team doesn't get out there, and Biden himself doesn't get out there and really tell it like it is. So let me give you an example. So Biden is asked, this was after Glenn Youngkin was elected governor of Virginia in 2021. And Youngkin was elected governor of Virginia, not based on economic circumstances or anything else, but on this perception that he wanted to curb, so-called critical race theory in the schools. He also wanted to give parents more, authority over the content of their kids' curriculum. And he was elected largely on the strength of that. Well, the day after Youngkin was elected, pundits and journalists were going around to top Democrats. They were asking them, what happened here? It was clearly a culture war issue that Youngkin won on. Democrat after Democrat pretty much understood that this was a culture war issue, but then the response was, so we've got to lower prescription drug prices, so we've got to get our infrastructure bill through. They wouldn't confront the right in the culture wars. This is what the Democrats do. They think they can somehow, just return to the kitchen table, ignore these culture war issues, which are what people actually vote on these days, just by returning to talking about prescription drug prices. They did that again and again. Biden was asked questions at a press conference right after Youngkin's election about critical race theory. And Biden, rather than taking a stance, started talking about infrastructure spending. Another journalist pressed it. Second journalist pressed it. No, Mr. President, CRT, critical race theory, seems to have been a big issue. What do you have to say about that? The Republicans are weaponizing this. They're using this against us. Biden started talking about COVID policies and again about infrastructure spending again. A third journalist pressed the issue. Biden wouldn't answer. This is low dominance politics. It makes you look like a coward. You won't answer the question. What a strong leader does under those circumstances is says something like the following. Look, I'm not even sure what critical race theory is. Something that the Republicans made up to divide our country, probably. But let me tell you this. If by critical race theory you mean that the United States is a hall of injustice that can't right itself, I'll tell you that's a pile of crap. There's nothing to that. But if by critical race theory you mean teaching the truth about slavery and racism in our schools, what patriotic American can be against that? This is what our country is all about, is about upping its game, coming to terms with its past problems, and becoming a much better country. So if just teaching our kids the truth about critical race theory is what you mean by critical race theory, then damn it, put me down as a critical race theorist. If Biden would define his own terms and step out and answer questions directly without being scared that he would offend the far left if he said that he was, the America was not a hall of injustice, or offending, moderates by saying, or the right by saying, put me down as a critical race theorist, if that fear-based approach that Biden and the Democrats bring could be done away with, and they define terms in their own ways, and they answer these questions directly, they would control the conversation rather than constantly being buffeted about by it. This is the kind of answer that would give Biden an entirely different persona, and he could do it tomorrow. Biden's got it in him.
I'm not sure he does, and if it was so simple, Steve, of course, he would. Isn't there something rotten? Not just within.
Let me stop you there, Andrew. That's not true. It is simple. He could do this. The problem is he has been bridled by his staff. He's worried about offending people. This goes back to Hillary Clinton, who poll tested everything she ever said, and every word she ever uttered was completely poll tested. This is not necessarily complicated. This isn't rocket science. This is telling your own truth and doing so provocatively. Any politician can do this, and Biden's got it in him.
But my point, Steve, is that there's something rotten in the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton did it. Joe Biden does it. Their bill, the anti-inflation bill, was a very radical bill, but they named it in a way to be as inoffensive as possible. Is there something structurally wrong, certainly with the center and the centrist control of the Democratic Party in America? Too many consultants, too many marketing people, too many people terrified of their own shadows. What's gone wrong?
I don't think it's a matter of whether you're on the left or the center. You can be a forceful, effective politician whether you're on the left or the center. That's not the issue. But I do think that you're right to say that, we live in this world of consultants, and what this world gives you is a deep aversion to risk. Everything is run through filters. Trump's magic is that Trump doesn't censor. Nobody tells Trump what to say. Trump ignores the advice of consultants. He's completely broken through that, and what you see with Trump is what you get. So this creates the impression, oddly enough, because this guy lies about everything under the sun, that he's the only honest politician in American politics, because he just tells you what he thinks. He doesn't pander. He doesn't tell you what he thinks you want to hear. The problem with the Democrats is they're so scripted, they're so controlled, they've become so pathologically risk-averse that their message never really gets through, and they never excite anybody. And this is how you can get this very progressive politician, Joe Biden, who's done a lot of great things, and people don't even know about it. Biden's also helped produce a crackling economy. More people think the economy is getting worse than it's getting better, which is ridiculous empirically. But this is a matter of presidential messaging. Here's another thing I found. If you go back over history of the 20th century, if you go back over the history of the 21st century, what you find is people have the most confidence in the economy when they have presidents who tell you how great the economy is doing on their watch. It's not when the economy is performing the best. So under Trump and under Bill Clinton, economic confidence was highest, and confidence in the president's ability to manage the economy was the highest. Under Biden and Obama, it was actually much lower. Is that because the economy was better under Trump or Clinton than it is under Biden or it was under Obama? No. In fact, objective circumstances have very little to do with these numbers. These numbers reflect the extent to which the elites around the president and the president himself, his people, were able to get their message out and convey that the economy is doing well because our guy is doing well. This is what he is bringing you. Trump picked a single indicator, which was how the stock market was doing. And every day, as it was rising, he said, look at the roaring good times I'm bringing you. The stock market right now is soaring far above Trump era levels. The stock market is setting records all the time. And we don't hear Biden talk about it. People don't know it. This economy is actually doing very well. The fact that people don't realize that is a problem with the Democratic Party's messaging. They're not getting the word out.
Steve, there's another way of looking at it, though, that the Democratic Party has become the party of the establishment, of the wealthy people of the coasts, here in California, on the East Coast, New York, Washington, D.C.
No, it's not.
And that the ruling class within not just the Democratic Party, but America, this new technocracy of lawyers and doctors and entrepreneurs, they're invested in the current system and they don't want to rock the boat. So there's a logic, whether people acknowledge it or not, to the Biden era political discourse.
Well, I mean, that's possible, but the Trump era political discourse was very different, and
sorry to interrupt.
We still live in the same era.
The difference between Trump and Biden is that Trump, for better or worse, has learned how to talk not just to elites, but to the working classes, to the angry classes, not just to white men. He has more and more support now, it seems, from our pollsters, from the Hispanic community, even from the African American community. He simply knows how to reach ordinary Americans, and that Biden has lost it, or maybe the Democratic Party has lost it.
Again, we're back to the appearance of sincerity. People don't trust that the Democrats are telling them what they really believe. They feel like the Democrats are telling them what they think they want to hear. When Trump steps out and talks to you, you have a feeling, okay, at least this is what Trump really believes. And, he's not just trying to tell me what I want to hear. He's not a panderer. Trump does not pander. Trump incites, but he doesn't pander. And people have this perception that the Democrats are pandering. They're telling them what they want to believe. That's what I mean by low dominance politics. And this is Trump's ace in the hole. It makes him look honest. To a lot of his supporters and even people beyond his base. He's honest Donald. And the reason is he always tells you the truth about what he believes, about his own internal world. He lies about the world outside himself all the time. This is not really a sign of courage in Trump's case. In fact, it's just, a manifestation of his narcissism combined with his lack of impulse control. But Trump's congenital political gift is that he makes these character defects look like bravery. And it gives him a big leg up. The Democrats can overmatch his dominance game by being much more authentic, by in cases where they're saying things that might actually go against the polls, that might not be popular, double down instead of backing down after you make a controversial statement. Tell people what you actually think, not what you think they want to believe. Do that, and your reputation for authenticity and honesty is going to go up. This is one of the things the Democrats have to do today.
What about on Gaza, Steve? This seems to be an area that Trump doesn't even have to say anything, but Biden is getting himself into a deeper and deeper hole. Given this idea of dominance, you suggest that dominance wins. Biden seems to have alienated everyone, supporters of Israel, opponents of Israel. What should Biden do on Gaza?
I think Biden has to stick with his guns. I'm not, that means...
Which guns? Not the Israeli guns, I hope.
Well, look, my biggest complaint about Biden's policy on Gaza is that he hasn't just stood up to Netanyahu. Netanyahu is a cancer on Israel. He's been a disaster for Israel.
Well, another successful dominance politician.
As well as a disaster for the Palestinians. Netanyahu might be a high dominance politician, but he shouldn't be dominating Biden. At least Biden should stand up to Netanyahu. The problem is Biden is basically pro-Israel. That's fine. That's his position. He needs to stick with that if that's what he believes. But to be jerked around by Netanyahu, to tell Netanyahu you can't carry this operation forward without losing support from us, and then to back away from that position when Netanyahu pushes his offensive forward is just weakness. I think the perception that Biden is being pushed around by Netanyahu is a big problem. What's more, Biden needs to stand up to Netanyahu. Netanyahu wants nothing more than a Trump re-election, right? I mean, Netanyahu is basically Israel's Trump, and they get along very well. He and Biden don't get along very well. I think it's time for Biden to hand Netanyahu his ass.
We know that dominance politicians are doing very, very well these days. You've written extensively on them. You're an expert on Russia. So Putin is a classic dominance politician. Trump, Modi, Erdogan, Orban in Hungary. Does this suggest, Steve, you talked about the crisis of American democracy, that people in quote-unquote democratic systems, they want to be dominated. They want to be led by strong leaders. And they're willing to let those strong leaders lead them in any way they choose, whether it's Putin or Modi or Netanyahu.
I don't think people want to be dominated, but they do want to be led by strong leaders who can't be dominated by other people. We're all familiar with the term owning the libs, okay? And the libs, they don't know that they are happy being owned, but they really don't know what to do about it. So the question is what, in fact, to do about that. They need to start owning the illibs. Nobody wants to be led by politicians who are owned by somebody else, who are dominated by somebody else. Even if your policies are popular with them, they're going to doubt your ability to actually sustain those policies anyway. People want to be led by strong leaders. That's true for everybody. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a natural part of the human condition. It's in our DNA. And again, you can be a high dominance politician from the left, right, or center. That's not really what's most important. What's most important is you're perceived of as actually being a strong leader who tells people what you think and is willing to take it to your opponents, right? And that's what the Democrats don't do nearly as well as they used to, and don't do these days as well as the Republicans do.
So where are the Democrats, or certainly progressives, going to get their dominance politician? I asked you earlier, you mentioned a governor in Kentucky and an obscure Texan politician. Is the future of dominance politics on the left amongst progressives, with perhaps somebody like Mark Cuban or some other techno-billionaire who, like Trump, says what he or she thinks?
I mean, a techno-billionaire could be an effective politician. That's not where I would look as a progressive. I think anybody can step into, anybody of any ideological orientation can do this thing right. Look, Bernie Dominance and Nancy Pelosi are high dominance politicians. They've been around for a long time. Bill Clinton was as well. We've got plenty of contemporary examples of strong leaders.
Well, was Clinton, didn't he tell everybody what they wanted to hear, which accounts for the failure of his administration? And Pelosi is a party politician. She's not a federal leader in the way in which we look to our president.
Well, she used to be. While she was Speaker of the House, she was very often the highest-ranking Democrat in the country. Bill Clinton was not a failed politician at all. Bill Clinton was the most successful president of our lifetimes. If you actually look at his policies and the effect of those policies, they were very progressive, and he was an incredibly competent politician. This is the last guy that won the white working class among the Democrats, and he did so twice. He did so while racking up huge margins with people of color. He won the Hispanic vote by 51% in 1996. African Americans loved him. He was able to actually swing a very large part of the South back to the Democrats. He had a lot of what it takes and what Democrats aren't doing today. Bill Clinton, in his own way, was a high dominance politician. He did use polls, and he used them strategically, but he always took it to his opponents. This guy owned Newt Gingrich, which wasn't all that easy to do, right? The Democrats need politicians like this today, and there are some of them. I mentioned Jasmine Crockett. I mentioned Andy Beshear. There are others as well. I like Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. There are other high dominance politicians as well, like Ruben Gallego, who's running for Senate from Arizona. He's a representative from Arizona. He's another good example.
Yeah, he was actually on the show. He wrote a very emotional book about his experience in the Iraq War. Final question, Steve. What about these third-party wannabe dominance politicians? Of course, we had Perot, who ran quite successfully against Bush and Clinton. And now we have one of the Kennedys running on an odd platform. He's an example of a dominance politician who seems to offend everybody. Is it possible that the future of dominance politicians won't be on the conventional left and right, but be with people like Kennedy who pick up issues like vaccination or the environment and scramble them all together in an odd ideological omelet?
No, I don't think RFK is a high dominance politician. I think he's just a goofball. Second of all, in the American system, the main action is always going to be with the Democratic and the Republican parties. The structure of the system means that you're always going to get this grouping into two camps, in our case, two parties. So whatever happens in this country is going to come out of one of those two parties. I just don't see the opportunity for a major third party or a major third party challenger to any presidential candidate for the foreseeable future.
And final, very briefly, because we're running out of time, Steve. If Biden's elected and he governs in the same undominant way that he's done over the last 4 years, what will the 2028 election look like?
Right now, we've just got to worry about getting Biden reelected and avoiding a Republican victory in the Senate and the House of Representatives as well. What's going to happen in 2028 if Biden is reelected, we don't know. But we do know democracy will survive another day. But just squeaking by, especially if we just squeak by on the Republicans' weaknesses like their abortion bans or the nomination of awful candidates, isn't enough. The Democrats have to change the game. If Trump isn't elected this time, he'll probably be the nominee for the Republican Party in 2028. And, Trumpism, even if Trump himself fades from the scene, isn't going to go away. The Democrats have to outclass the Republicans in a number of different dimensions, but also in dominance politics for the foreseeable future in order for democracy to be safe in this country. Because the old McCain-Reagan spirit of the Republican Party, that is a truly conservative spirit and a spirit that honors democracy, even though these people were not my kind of politician because they were very much on the right, that spirit of respect for democracy is gone. It's dead in the Republican Party right now. Trump is slated. Until the Republicans are whipped in successive elections for being against democracy, for eviscerating democracy, democracy will be under threat in the United States. The Democrats have to change the game.
He's an expert.